With this, I'll move to the first section of the talk. And by sort of taking a look at what the field of visual arts was like as pertains to the representation of women, not only in the field of fine arts or high art, but also in fields such as colonial anthropology and ethnography, popular print culture, and even cinema. The first as part of several sort of colonial, anthropological, and ethnographic projects undertaken in the 19th and early 20th centuries came the identification and classification of colonial knowledge about native subjects, right? Native castes and tribes in various regions of India. Now, this kind of representation came to have significant effects not only in terms of colonial administration, colonial law and policy vis-a-vis these native subjects, but also was effective in producing stereotypes with long-lasting after effects about Indian men and women in particular, as backward, primitive, uncivilized, illiterate, superstitious, and at times criminal subjects. All of these subjects were to be measured, studied, and scientifically proven through rigorous documentation as examples of types. Now, this project of producing stereotypes of native subjects was continued and taken up even as part of the nationalist project by way of showing up the diversity of Indian women, right? So, for instance, what we see here is the work of an artist, M.V. Dhurandhar, and this work is part of a series called Women in India, Women of India, for which he produced several illustrations. And what you have here are, again, representations of particular types. So you have the fisherwoman, the woman who sells fruits, the Muslim woman, the Parsi woman, and you have all of these sort of types, and these become very sort of formative sort of stereotypes about various kinds of women, and this becomes sort of pervasive, particularly in sort of popular consciousness. This was the book that Dhurandhar was part of. Now, what were some of the other sort of portrayals of women in art and popular culture? Religious iconography and the woman as the goddess basically is one of the most prevalent and popular imageries that we find in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. So moving between sort of two extremes of the benevolent sort of goddess and the malevolent sort of goddess, the late 19th century saw for the first time lifelike portrayals of gods and goddesses in India, and attributed largely to the artwork of Raja Ravi Varma, who popularized these images through the setting up of his lithographic printing press. These images of lifelike deities entered every Hindu household in India to be reproduced in magazines, posters, and calendar art. Now, if the goddess was one kind of popular representation of the woman, the figure of the woman, another was the woman as mother, right? The quintessential sort of desexualized familial figure. And what's interesting is that at a particular point of time, this figure of the mother gets transposed onto the nation, right, which is represented as motherland. So here, for instance, on the right, you have a painting by Abanindranath Tagore, and it was originally Bengal, the mother of Bengal, but later was appropriated by the nationalist movement to stand for Mother India, right? So now Mother India, either as a goddess or a mendicant, a saint, who would bless her patriotic citizens. And again, we see this across the board from popular print culture to high art, right? Including even in sort of modernist art practice post-independence, such as in the controversial work of M.F. Hussain, which, though untitled was recognized as a representation of Mother India, thereby constituting an insult to apparently both women and the nation, right? Another sort of popular mode of representing women included showing them in various acts of leisure. And here we refer to women of the aristocratic classes, extended later to the middle classes, fostering the notion of women as sort of these delicate beings that either just like to while away their time, have a good time, that needed looking after. So you have them sitting on a swing, lying down and relaxing in a park, taking photos in front of the Taj Mahal, petting a deer, and so on, right? So what we see here is the absence of any concept of work, right? And we see this spilling over into the way that early women artists' practice was also seen as hobby or vocation, right? The last sort of trope that I will touch upon is that of the muse and the nude. Now, it is pretty common knowledge, especially with the work of John Berger's ways of seeing, that there is a simple yet powerful distinction between nakedness and nudity, right? Nakedness being simply a state of having no clothes, whereas nudity becomes a form of artistic representation, right? It becomes an object for being looked at. Nudity, of course, is tied to the gaze, in most instances, the male gaze, and the voyeuristic implications of it. Now, the debate around nudity in the context of India was interestingly also pitched in terms of its relation to professional modeling and anatomy study. So, for instance, those who defended the painting of the nude image, defended it as being different from sort of the aristocratic painters of the West who painted just their muses. Here, on the other hand, it was seen as purely professional practice. It was an attempt at anatomy study, right? Or serious professional modeling, right? This debate, of course, came to a head when artists used their own wives as models for paintings. So in a sense, the moral question that it posed remained at the level of saying that it was okay for certain women to pose nude and not for others, right? Now, the nude figure as an artistic trope itself, as we well know, has been the subject of much feminist critique, and yet we see it as one of the most sort of commonly running sort of tropes throughout the history of modernist practice in India.